I know, right? I know, right? Yeah, you got King with the whoosh, and then you got Zoro with the... Yeah, and I'll tell you what, man, that's what it's all about right there. Oh, yeah. Oh, man, I should just do the entire video like that. We should just dial this back to the Stone Age and just do caveman reactions to One Piece episode 1062 when Zoro fights King. And just like, yes, King, big fireman, lava dragon, Zoro, 3-sword cut. Ooh, ugh-like. Yeah, okay, listen. I loved the Sanji versus Queen episode. I really did. The animation was, chef's kiss amazing. Now, I didn't make a video about that fight, but I am making a video about this. And honestly, I think it's just because Zoro gets cooler fights than Sanji in the story. But go watch the Sanji versus Queen fight if you haven't. That's incredible. And this is incredible. They're both incredible, all right? But just Zoro, I think, gets cooler fights. Honestly, I think an argument could be made that Zoro gets even cooler fight scenes than Luffy, who's the main character of One Piece, right? And you know what? I actually sat down and I formulated a scientific hypothesis. We're going to test this with the scientific method, ladies and gentlemen. Here is my hypothesis on why Zoro has the cooler fight scenes than Sanji or Luffy. Zoro uses 3 swords. How many swords does Sanji use? Gotta say 0. And how many swords does Luffy use? Also 0. Zoro has a +3 advantage on this. I'm sorry. I'm a Bleach fan. I love anime characters that use swords. I mean, swords are just inherently cool. And Zoro uses 3 of them. Maybe that was the marketing strategy when Oda came up with Zoro's character. He's like, all right, we're gonna need a really badass anime swordsman in One Piece. You know what actually would make him cooler? 2 swords. Actually, wait, hold on a minute. 3 swords. Wait, maybe 4? No, 4 is just silly. That's ridiculous. Where's he gonna hold the 4th sword? In his butt cheeks? Let's dial that back. 3 swords. He's already 3 times cooler. That's just how you tell how cool an anime swordsman is, like by the sheer quantity of number of swords that he uses. That's how it's determined. Look at Ichigo in the final arc of Bleach. He gets 2 swords and he's twice as cool. That's just how it works. Okay, so this covers the chapters pretty much from when Zoro slices off King's mask all the way up to the finale of the battle, which means we also get King's backstory here. And it's expanded upon a little bit more than in the manga. We don't get a crazy amount more, but we get a little bit more detail on exactly the experimentation that was done to King or Alber while he was at Punk Hazard. Also, we get to see King fight a little bit more in that backstory. So, Kaido can really see what he's made of and how he's like so strong and everything like that, and how he gets the name King and all that stuff. We get that in the manga. It's just kind of like much more brief kind of flashback. So that was really cool there. Let's open this up with a controversial topic, which has been controversial pretty much all throughout Wano, really. And it's the aura. It's the aura situation, like One Piece characters now have auras around them. Look, I love the auras. I really genuinely do. Look, you cannot look at this scene. Zoro on top of a giant flaming mountain in the middle of the night with green aura rings surrounding his swords. I'm sorry, that's cool as shit. I'm sorry, all right? Also, in terms of, if you're wondering, maybe it's oh, well, One Piece was never animated like this. We never had these crazy auras for most of the story, and now we're getting to this. Hey, if you want an in-universe explanation for it, and I was even thinking about this while I was watching the episode, because I'm watching this episode, and I'm just sitting there like King is in a pteranodon form firing fire bullets at Zoro and he's dodging, and then there's that scene where King transforms into a pteranodon Beyblade, like a spinning top of just sheer death buzzsaw through the sky, and Zoro's clashing with that thing, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching this and man, we've come a long way since when Zoro cut down Morgan. We've come a long way since Zoro fought against the Niamban brothers back at Syrup Village, right? It's just a moment of clarity where we're at episode 1062 of this. You dial this back to the East Blue when Zoro is like, oh yeah, the Niamban brothers, I'll fight them. It's like, oh yeah, this is a little bit of thing. That was level 1 Zoro. This is like level 95 at this point. You know what I mean? It really is insanity how long this story has gone. It's like when you play Final Fantasy and you start off and you're really wimpy and you have to just fight slimes, then at the end you are literally killing a god. Except that's a video game that takes you, like, you know, a lot of time to play. Final Fantasy games, you know, several hours, several days of gameplay to get through that. But this is a series that's lasted 20 plus years, so it's a lot more drawn out, and it's a lot more like you see the progression of the Straw Hats in a much more clear way throughout the story. So that's the way I justify the auras. It's like we're literally getting to a point now where the Straw Hats are so damn strong. I think some cool battle hockey auras are justified here. I think it makes sense. I think it's fine, all right? Another series that does that is pretty famous is Dragon Ball. You know, Dragon Ball starts out with Goku, you know, he uses a Kamehameha that can barely destroy a car, and at the end he's literally like, you literally have God Ki and Super Saiyan God and all this other crazy stuff, Kaioken plus Super Saiyan Blue, all these crazy auras going around. So that's the way I've always viewed it. That's the way I kind of look at it, and I'm fine with these auras. And also I just love the animation and the way they're depicted, the way they use the lighting here, where King is constantly basking in the flames that he creates on his back, and so then Zoro has the purple aura that Enma kind of puts out, but then he can kind of switch it up, then there's like the green aura coming off the rest of his swords. You know, Zoro having green aura around his swords, like, it just looks cool. I'm sorry. I'm going with it. I'm rocking with that 110%, okay? But, you know, at this point, I really want to talk about the flashback because I love that flashback. It was a really cool scene. It was a cool scene in the manga, and I'm glad what they did with it in the anime. So, yeah, the battle was cool with the choreography, but that flashback, right in the middle of the episode, I think they put that flashback at, like, the perfect spot, too. It was right after the eye catch, right after the, like, the commercial break, and so you come back, and King is reminiscing about when he first met Kaido. So, we see Punk Hazard, the lab. We don't exactly know how long ago this was. I'm thinking it had to have been more than 20 years ago, because 20 years ago, well, actually no, it was 28 years ago, I think, when Kaido began setting up his operation in Wano. That was after Odin had left with Whitebeard, and then I think 28 years ago, that's when Higo Arashi Kurozumi approached Kaido and was like, I have a proposition for you. And then Kaido's like, what? And he's like, come to Wano. It's like, all right. And so then he does that, right? So that's why Odin was away. So King, I think at that point, was already firmly established as Kaido's right-hand man, because the parallels, and it was, you know, apparent in the manga, but it's even more apparent here, the parallels between Kaido and King and Luffy and Zoro cannot be overlooked, all right? King was the first member of Kaido's pirate crew. It was like pretty much right after Kaido decided, you know what? I'm thinking about starting my own pirate crew. King, I want you to join, you know? Same thing with Luffy. Luffy decides, I'm going to start my pirate crew, heads out to sea. One of the first people he hears about from Kobe is like, oh yeah, Roronoa Zoro. He's the pirate hunter. He's really powerful. He's like a demon. And Luffy's like, oh, cool, great. First person to be on my crew. That's a great first mate. I want to have him on there, right? So the parallels there are very clear. We see this even more so at Punk Hazard. Had to have been like over 30 years ago, I would say. You know, at this point, you know, King, I believe, is like a teenager at this point. I think he's like in his early 40s right now, so that probably lines up. And so anyway, Kaido breaks free of the shackles. He's running around Punk Hazard. The alarm's going off and everything like that. He's like, we got an intruder! Kaido ate his dinner and now he's breaking free again. You know, you think at a certain point the government would just try to like stop trying to go after him. Like, he's literally gotten captured and then, you know, emptied out the endless buffet on the marine ships and then immediately breaks free and kills a lot of people in the process. You think after a certain point the government would just be like, all right, we're gonna stop trying to even bother with him because he breaks free every time. But anyway, Kaido breaks free for like the 17th time or whatever, and he's, you know, going through Punk Hazard, and you actually see the form of torture that is done to King here. I think in the manga it was only mentioned, but Kaido is walking into the lab where King is imprisoned, and he is inside of an oven. He's like, they literally just strapped him, chained him down to a damn slab, and then shoved him into an oven. like a blast furnace, and then just cranked it. And King is in there like screaming and like struggling with the chains and just like why are you doing this to me? Let me out of here. I'll burn you all to the ground, you know? And it's like, holy shit. Like the government's form of like endurance test is just like, yeah, crank up the blast furnace we use to like superheat steel and then shove the prisoner in there and then see how he handles that, right? So Kaido walks in and he hears King screaming, and there's this furnace that's active. So, you know, Kaido takes his kanabo and just breaks it and then pulls out King, and King is over. Like, he's not really all that physically damaged, not to say that it did not hurt him. It's just because I don't think the Lunarians are not immune to fire. They are not immune to fire. They can summon fire. Fire is an aspect of their abilities. King can charge up fire for his blade and everything like that. King cannot breathe fire. We've never really seen him like breathing fire. He cannot turn into fire. It's just that his body has a crazy amount of endurance and is very tough. Later on in the flashback, we see him literally blocking bullets. Like a bunch of people come out of the woods, like Marines, to try to stop them, and they fire a bunch of shots, and King just like raises up his arm, and the bullets just hit his arm and then just fall to the ground. Like they don't even dent his skin. They don't even cause like a bruise or anything like that. But still, that's the thing. It's just like the government learns about Lunarian physiology and is just like, ah, yes, they have a very high endurance factor. Let's stress test this. Let's see how high of endurance they have. And so you can only just imagine the sheer torture they dealt to King while he was at Punk Hazard. They were probably thinking of like the worst things. It's just like, all right, you know, let's build a giant spike bed and then set him on that, and then have another spike bed that's like 2 tons crush him. Let's see how well he endures that. Let's throw him in the blast furnace at like, you know, like 5,000 degrees and see how he deals with that, you know? And so Kaido frees him, and he's like, oh, okay, I understand why the government captured you. You're a Lunarian, huh? And then King at first is just like, oh, what are you gonna do? Like, who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm just a pirate thinking about starting my own crew. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, I like watching Kaido back when he was more motivated, before he was just a drunk. You know, I wonder, actually, Kaido when he was at his most motivated versus Luffy right now, because you could make the argument, well, Kaido is physically stronger now because he's had all those years to really perfect his devil fruit and everything like that, but he's not as motivated. He started getting motivated when he fought Luffy. He got like that spark back in him again, but I'm wondering how it would have went when like Kaido was like this Kaido in the flashback. You know, it's only been a few years after Rocks, and honestly, Kaido's story, I mean, he's really the protagonist of his own little, like, you could do like a side story with Kaido as the protagonist. It works so well. Kaido was the apprentice on Rox's crew, so he was like the runt of the litter. He was the one that was like on the lowest rung of the ladder on Rox's crew. He was like the cabin boy, all right? He was like, you know, Rox and Captain John and Shiki are getting drunk and throwing bottles everywhere, and then they're the ones that stumble, you know, he's like, hey, Kaido, clean this shit up, we're going to bed. You know, like, that's the kind of stuff Kaido had to do growing up. He was the apprentice, all right? And so then the Rocks crew gets broken apart. You know, Rocks purportedly dies at God Valley, and then Kaido gets captured a bunch of times so he can fill his stomach. And then he decides after a while, you know, while he's sitting in his cells and also undergoing a lot of torture, he's like, you know what? I think I'm going to start my own pirate crew. I also like to think while he was being imprisoned, he was thinking about the dynamic of his pirate crew, like how everything would be laid out. And he's like, I need to have a theme. Yeah, all right, let's see here. Pirate theme. Oh, I know. I like playing cards. Yeah, how about I lay out my crew like playing cards, like King and Queen and Jack? Yeah, that sounds cool. That sounds cool. Because, like, one of the first things he does after he frees Alber and they're breaking out of Punk Hazard and they're beating all, there was like a really cool scene where the Marine snipers are like trying to, like, they're walking out of Punk Hazard and the snipers are way up there and they're just like, all right, we'll take them out, we'll like headshot them, and then they look through the scope of the rifle and then Kaido just glances at them and just boom, just shock of Conqueror's Haki, and they both get knocked out. And then the Marines from the Fortress come out with the guns and King just dispatches them really quickly. And so Kaido's like, hey, I never got your name. And he's like, it's Alber. He's like, Alber, huh? you know what? You're really strong. You should go by King for now on. Yeah, King. That's the way my crew's going to be set up. We're going to find some dude named Queen and then some other guy named Jack, but you're King, you know? And he's like, okay. You know, and he just rolled with that. Also, at this point, they use, I don't remember the name of the OST, but they use the same OST that was used back during Sabaody when Rayleigh was remembering Roger. In the anime, if you remember that scene where they're talking about, like, because that's right where we find out that Roger was actually not captured by the government, but he turned himself in. And so Rayleigh was there drinking some whiskey, and he remembers Roger behind him, and he's reminiscing about the last words that Roger said to Rayleigh, which were, you know, I won't die, partner. Like, even if they kill me, I won't die. And that same soundtrack plays here when Kaido and Alber are escaping Punk Hazard, and he gives him the name King, and then Alber kind of looks at him, because you have to understand, we don't know much about Alber's life before he was captured by the government, but we understand this has, like, been his life ever since he was a little kid. We don't know the situation with Alber's parents. Maybe they were all captured as a family, and his parents were killed, or, you know, his parents had to abandon him because they got chased off or got captured when he was a little kid and he had to live his life on his own. And he was captured by the government a lot. And every single time, I think it's also, honestly, some parallels to Robin here, where Robin was wanted by the world government from a young age. And even if she found a place that she thought was going to be safe, like, not even bad people, like, there were some bad people, like, there was that old grandma that was like, oh, yes, Robin, come and have some cookies and tea. You can rest here. It's fine, dear. And then she immediately picked up the Den Den Mushi and was just like, yeah, she's here, devil child, Nico Robin. You know what I mean? So, like, Robin ran away, and she even found some nice people that were trying to help her, but at the end of the day, they ended up turning her into the government. I imagine it's something very similar with Alber, where a lot of times he thought that, like, oh, okay, this is a tiny little village out in the middle of nowhere. Maybe I can be safe here. Maybe I can be accepted. And maybe for a little while it was okay. But as soon as everyone found out about, like, oh, he's a Lunarian, you understand, the government is offering a 100 million berry reward just for information about King, about Alber. That is insane. That is not even like if you bring in Alber or a Lunarian. That is just information on them. That is how much the government wants the Lunarians. Okay? And we see that partially with Vegapunk's research, with the research in the Seraphim and all that, but also just because the Lunarians are closely connected to Marijois and the Red Line, and, you know, if there were Lunarians around, I mean, if there was any tribe in One Piece that knew about the Void Century and knew about what the world government really did back then during the war, it would be the Lunarians. And so it's like, if there's any survivors, you gotta, you know, capture them and bring them in, right? So King is extremely distrusting of anybody around him. It doesn't matter who it is. And so this is a very kind of cool moment where Alber is looking up at Kaido, and Kaido is talking. Once again, this is not current drunk Kaido. This is motivated Kaido in the prime of his youth. And motivated Kaido is just like, come with me. We can turn this world upside down, and only I can do it. Yes! And then King is kind of looking at him just like, you know what? There's something about this guy. There's something about this dude. You know what I mean? Like, I can follow this guy, right? And it's at that moment where Kaido tells him, I will never sell you out. You join my crew, I'm never going to sell you out. I don't care about what the government wants. I don't care about how big the bounty is. Do not worry. I never sell you out. And he never does. Kaido, if nothing else, you got to understand, he's at least honorable in that respect. He's a shitty father to Yamato, but at least he's honorable to his, like, his underlings, the people that work for him, and especially with King, who's like his right-hand man. And also parallels to that, where Luffy saves Zoro from being tortured, starving to death, you know, on the cross back at Shell's Town. You know, he's starving to death, and so Luffy saves him from that. And then he's like, "Hey, join my crew," and he's like, "Come with me." And then Zoro's like, "Okay," and then there you go. So very, very similar parallels there to Luffy and Zoro, and a little bit to Robin, I think, as well. So that that was the flashback. Really, really solid rendition of that flashback there. You know, King and Queen were imprisoned in the Udon prison after Wano was over, and then Aramaki defeated them. So I don't really know if we're going to get a lot more with them in the future, but I would really love to learn more about specifically Alber's backstory. I mean, learning more about the Lunarians in general is like that's like I think a guarantee. Like we're going to get that. When we get the flashback with the Void Century, we'll probably get a big backstory with the Lunarian tribe in general. But I don't know if I'm the only one, but I want to learn more about Alber. I want to learn more about like his upbringing, because it's one thing, it's one piece of the puzzle to learn about the Lunarians as they lived at, you know, during the Void Century, and as the world government cast them off of the Red Line and the strife and the struggle that they had to deal with then. But then it's another story to flash forward 800 years and be like, okay, this is what it's like for the survivors. There cannot be a lot of Lunarians left. I mean, King may in fact be the last, you know, biological Lunarian. There's the Seraphim, but those are like artificial, created from his DNA, okay? So it's possible that Alber might be the last one. And so like that alone is fascinating. Like I want to know the story of like the last Lunarian and his struggle throughout life, you know, because we only know a small portion of it right now. It's just one of those things. A lot of stories about a lot of One Piece characters that are really fascinating that just Oda hasn't had a chance to flesh out, right? But anyway, back to the fight now. It's really important to set that up as establishing, though, because both of these characters are fighting to make their captains the king. And they are pretty close to that. I mean, it's not like Zoro's fighting some random dude from some random pirate crew that's like, my captain's gonna be king. It's like, no. Kaido has a good, solid shot at being king of the pirates from where he stands. Luffy also has a pretty solid shot at being king of the pirates from where he stands over here. So Zoro and King are both propping up their captains, and it's just like, no, Kaido will be the king of the pirates. No, sorry to tell you this, but Luffy's gonna be king of the pirates. And that motivation, that drive, that determination is on their faces and is displayed in full view with the art style, with the animation, with the way that the fights, they clash. There's that one scene where King brings down the sword. The fact that King is much taller than Zoro is also utilized really well, like the size difference there, where King takes his sword and like brings it down as an overhanded slice right on top of Zoro, and they hit the ground and this massive crater is created, and just Haki is just spewing out like crazy. And I love that scene where it just shows the size and the power of King, like barreling down this with this giant sword. And then Zoro has to use all three of his swords to kind of even like try to even push King's sword back. So they utilize that really well. King busts out that sword breaker again. I can't remember if that scene was in the manga, where I know he uses it earlier, but I don't know if he uses it right at this point. But that was really cool if that was anime only, because scene where, you know, he uses the sword breaker like last time and he tosses all the blades away, but Zoro's like, oh no, I will not allow you to toss away these fine blades, you know what I mean? And so he pushes it back there. That was a really good shot. Just the choreography, a lot of maybe something like a final battle, like a Castlevania game. You know, I think because in Castlevania at the end of Season 4, there was the scene where Trevor fights against Death, and they're on that floating platform in the middle of a giant typhoon, and there's rocks and rubble that are just spewing around in this massive tornado, and Trevor's like dancing around on the rocks. It's like that here, and this isn't even, I have to reiterate, this is not even the final battle. Kaido and Luffy is still going on, but this feels, they animated this like it's the final battle. They animated this like Zoro is the damn protagonist, and this is the final battle of his entire story. And I love them for it. The grandioseness of this is impeccable. So you got giant rocks in the air, and then Zoro's dancing around on the rocks, and then King's up there. I mean, look at this. King is like a fire magma dragon god, summoning these freaking things to just attack Zoro, and Zoro has to jump through the rocks in the air, and he's dodging, he's doing cartwheels and shit, he's slicing through the dragons. It ends with his extra large, you know, Kanyudo, you know, and he just brings up this giant lava dragon that just gets sent at Zoro, and then Zoro uses Dragon Damnation, which is still one of the coolest names for an attack. I also like to think that Zoro planned that attack beforehand. Like Zoro, while he was training, he was like thinking about the attack that he was going to use to kill Kaido, because Zoro really wanted to get the kill shot on Kaido, right? So he's sitting there and he's thinking about all those cool attacks, and he's like, all right, I think I'm going to call it Dragon Damnation. That's a cool one. So Zoro fights Kaido, but he doesn't manage to get to that point, and so he's like, oh, man. So then he starts fighting King, and he's like, well, King uses dragons. They're fire magma dragons, but yeah, they're close enough. They're still counting as dragons. All right, I'll use Dragon Damnation on this guy instead. I didn't get a chance to use it against Kaido, but you know, here we are now, right? Dragon Damnation against Kaido. Would it have been more or less effective than Dead Man's Game? There's another question for you, right? Oh, by the way, okay. This has nothing to do with the episode. This is more of just the way that it was written, and I don't know. Okay. I'm not claiming to know that, like, I can write One Piece better than Oda. I'm just saying that there was one part of this arc, specifically Zoro's story, that I think you could have rewritten it would make way more sense, like, just canonically without getting stuff involved with, like, things that we didn't even know about. And that was how Zoro recovered from his battle with Kaido. So, like, I think Law said something like he broke like a crazy amount of bones. It was like in the double digits of how many bones that Zoro had broken in that fight with Kaido, and he was all cast up, you know, in the cross joint, and, you know, Sanji had to carry him around and everything like that. And I feel like instead of bringing up, and I think the mink medicine was foreshadowed a little bit beforehand, but instead of bringing up the mink medicine, it's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. We have this magical medicine. We'll just inject it into Zoro, and like all of his bones, I guess, will just heal. It'll really hurt him afterwards, but for right now, this will work. And I felt like a way better way of doing this is utilizing Marco's flames of rejuvenation, because Marco was the one that was fighting against Queen and King individually. It was like 2-on-1 with Marco, and he was kind of like holding down the fort while Zoro and Sanji prepped for their individual fights, okay, to kind of take it from him. So honestly, though, I thought this would have been perfect, because let's say you could have Marco have some kind of ability that it's like, okay, I can use my flames of rejuvenation to heal any and all wounds on one person. But the downside of that is that's going to greatly drain my stamina, Marco's stamina, so he can't fight anymore. It's going to greatly drain my stamina, and it doesn't last forever. You are going to feel pain. So basically, the same, I'm okay with the mechanics of the medicine, but just the fact that, like, medicine exists in the One Piece world, just like regular medicine that you can just inject into somebody, and it doesn't matter how banged up they are, broken bones, muscle tears, broken limbs, it doesn't matter. You just, all right, let's fight. You know, like that. Fine, it's anime, but like having magical, mythical zone powers, that makes more sense. So, and also it would have been so symbolic of Marco, like, passing the torch, literally being like, you know, Zoro, you will be the one to defeat King. Marco, I am the first division. I was the right-hand man of Whitebeard, and now I'm not anymore, and you are the right hand of Luffy, and he's going to be king of the pirates, and I will use the last of my flames of rejuvenation. This will drain my stamina, so I won't be able to fight anymore after this, but it's okay, because I'm leaving it to you, and then I'll give you this power, and then you can fight, and then after the fight's over, then it'll really hurt you. It'll be like kickback from the flames of rejuvenation using it in this capacity, but I believe in you. And so Marco's like, whoosh, and then here you go, and then Zoro gets up and goes fights, and then Marco just kind of like lays down. He's like, good luck to you. And then, because Marco doesn't really do anything else throughout the rest of the battle anyway, so I don't know. That was a thing that always bugged me, just by the fact, like, oh, we have medicine that can just cure your wounds, and it's like, okay, I feel like there's another better way you could have utilized that, but that's just me. That's just my headcanon or whatever. Okay. Zoro wins the fight. We have the big narrator come on, the big explanation of, like, you know, the winner of the fight on top of the dome or on top of the island, King versus Zoro, winner Zoro, and then boom. And then they even gave him a custom to be continued screen, which was awesome, with the Z behind to be continued, which is funny for so many reasons. Number one, it's just funny because Z, as in that's his name, Zoro. Also the fire, the aspect, because he's been fighting fire this entire time. And also that is the calling card of Zoro, the original Zoro, you know, from the old school movies and teleplays and stuff like that, where it's like the mark of Zoro, and he would take his sword and cut a Z into somebody's fabric or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's like his calling card. Okay, so they made a lot of references there with just that in the background, so I love the custom to be continued. That was really sweet. And finally, at the very end here, I wanted to throw something else out, because remember, this was the last big fight Zoro had. was against King. Like in the manga right now, Zoro fought against Kaku a little bit. He fought against S-Hawk a little bit, Mihawk, Seraphim. But Zoro has yet to have as much of a serious fight as he had with King here. We'll see what happens. You know, the Marines are showing up, and, you know, if there's going to be like a full-on fight between S-Hawk and Zoro, maybe something like that might happen right here. Maybe some other people might get involved. Who knows? But during this fight, Zoro was essentially deciding to, like, I'm just going to let, you know, Enma draw out as much hockey as it can, right? And so basically creating a timer, like a ticking clock element to Zoro fighting. So he's like, you know, I'm just going to let Enma take as much hockey as it can. I'm going full throttle, and it's either I defeat King or Enma kills me, like one or the other, you know what I mean? So, but because Zoro is kind of imposing that restriction upon himself, he's kind of like putting his back against the wall. I wonder if that's how Zoro is going to use, like, his fighting style, like his three-sword style in the future. Whenever he's fighting against somebody, like, just letting Enma take his hockey, so it's beneficial for Enma, it deals more damage, but also, like, Zoro's fighting because he knows, like, I have to finish this fight quickly, because if I don't, I'm literally going to die. And so that's, like, literally that fighting on the edge. You know, Zoro's, like, fighting on this really thin, like a tripwire as he's, like, dancing over a chasm or whatever, and he's just like, okay, one wrong move and I'm gone. But that's the way he likes it, you know, to really motivate him to win. All right, so that's a really cool aspect, and I'm hoping that maybe in the future that's how Zoro would fight against, like, Shiryu or somebody, like, all or nothing kind of style, right? So yeah, those are my thoughts on the episode. Really solid episode. Go check it out if you haven't. Yeah, I'm always, at the end of the day, like, whenever talking about animation, I struggle to try to figure out, like, correct adjectives to use here. Like, it was phenomenal, it was amazing, it was bombastic, but at the end of the day, it's just go watch the episode. Go watch the animation. Anyway, moving on now to some really awesome URCHIN facts. Oh, yeah. This actually fits because Zoro names a lot of his techniques after Japanese cuisine like onigiri, and even King names his attacks after, you know, like certain types of food. And so today, correctly, we will be talking about sea urchins being used as food. Go to the intro. URCHIN facts. URCHIN facts. Do-do-do. URCHIN facts. Do-do-do. All right, so yeah, sea urchins as food. You can eat them. They're very high in protein. They're high in omega-3 fatty acids. So yeah, they're completely edible. Now, some of them are venomous, as we mentioned earlier. You can prick yourself with one of them, and you can get, you know, a sting and maybe like some venom in you. However, you don't actually eat the part of the sea urchin that's like spiny, and not all sea urchins are spiny. Remember that. However, all sea urchins are actually edible, even the ones that are venomous, because there's only actually one part of the sea urchin that you're going to eat that is actually used in sushi and food over in Japan mainly. It's a Japanese delicacy called uni, and used in sushi and sashimi and stuff. What part of the sea urchin do you think they use in the cooking? I'll let you guess. You know what? Just don't think too hard about it. It's not hard. All right. Yeah, it's the gonads. Yeah, it's the sex organs. Yeah, it's like, of course it is. Yeah, okay. So they take the sex organs of the sea urchin and they cook that. You can eat it. You know, you can even eat it on top of the urchin like this. They put it in sushi. It has a... I've seen a bunch of words to describe what this tastes like. I've heard creamy, custardy, delicate, musky, umami flavor, like the umami flavor, that, you know, okay, so it's called the foie gras of the ocean, is sea urchins. So you could dive down, find some sea urchins, and sell them, go to Japan and sell them for, I guess, a decent price, because they're the foie gras of the ocean. The ones found in the most, like, cold water regions are the meatiest, as it were. So take that whatever you will there. And to end it out, it also, I don't know if there's anything to back this up. I assume there probably is not, but some people consider sea urchin meat to be an aphrodisiac of sorts. So, yeah. That's sea urchins being used as food, or uni. So, yeah. That's the fact of the day. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching, signing out. Later, everyone.